This is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight, featuring commentary by Mark Casello, Scott Hibbard, Charles Lipsome, and Ryan Yantis. Our program tonight coming to you from our home base at the Paul and Angel Harvey Radio Studio at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Nice to have you with us. Our toll-free lines are now open at 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289. If you'd like to email me a comment, it's beyondthebeltway2019@gmail. If you want to tweet me a comment, it's at Dumo, at D-U-M-O. You can go to our website and see the show at beyondthebeltway.com. And also you can see a past show if you ever missed one. It's always there. And, of course, we are live on Facebook and we are live on YouTube. And, again, we've got a great 2 hours. We have a lot of major politics to discuss with you this evening, and certainly the events of the last 12 hours have given us our lead story this evening, and that is the dramatic announcement this morning by the President of the United States, in which he talked about a military operation last night which killed the head of ISIS, and we'll be talking about that as the program unfolds this evening. And again, it has really dominated news today and probably for the next week or so. And again, we begin by turning back the clock just a few hours. It was shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern time this morning that the president from the White House delivered a message to the United States and its citizens.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. Baghdadi was vicious and violent, and he died in a vicious and violent way as a coward, running and crying. I want to thank the soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines involved in last night's operation. You are the very best there is anywhere in the world. No matter where you go, there is nobody even close. Last night was a great night for the United States and for the world. A brutal killer, one who has caused so much hardship and death, has violently been eliminated. He will never again harm another innocent man, woman, or child. He died like a dog. He died like a coward. The world is now a much safer place.
Bruce DuMont back, and Scott Hibbard joins us, making his first visit in a long, long time from DePaul University. Scott, nice to have you with us.
Great, nice to see you.
How significant is this event?
Symbolically very significant, but realistically it's not going to change much on the ground. He's a figurehead. The ISIS organization continues to exist underground, and it will continue.
Charles Lipson from the University of Chicago, frequent guest, your response?
I'm a little more optimistic. I think he's more than a figurehead. I think he had operational control, and I think he was a charismatic figure. Eliminating him helps a lot, but when you have an organization this big, decapitating doesn't eliminate it.
Mark Casello joins us, also a Democrat.
Yes, it's good to see that he's gone. It's an understatement. But the question is, strategically, what is our long-term plan? A chapter's closed, an important chapter in the war on terror, but there's always another chapter that's opening.
Ryan Yantis, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired. Your reaction?
Good evening, Bruce. I'm recalling in 2010, another fellow with the name of al-Baghdadi got eliminated, and there was a lot of chest thumping and high fives. And it promised the ushering of a new time. And here we are a couple of years later, and we're doing it all over again. So we're going once around the revolution on this. Cells in terrorist organizations and resistance are just that. They're cells, self-contained. Somebody else is going to step in.
The timing of this, how important was this to the politics of the region, and frankly to the politics of Donald Trump, that this happened now in the wake of his decisions in Syria and the relations with Turkey?
Well, and that's going to have to play out in open source information. But one of the things, the 50 or so soldiers that were pulled out, the military assets were pulled out last week by President Trump. I'm here to tell you 50 soldiers deployed on the ground is significant to us, but it's a small footprint. And reallocating and moving mechanized forces into the center of gravity, which is the oil fields farther east, probably had more import. As far as for timing, it's developed by the intelligence and identifying where the bad guy is on the ground at the time and being able to correlate the forces in to get him.
Do you agree with that, Scott?
Well,
There's, in other words, for those who are suspicious of government and suspicious of Donald Trump, there's no potential wag the dog.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I would look at it slightly different. I think that this operation succeeded despite the Trump policy, not because of it. And the reporting that's already coming out is they've been looking at this guy for like 6 weeks or several months, and they had to push up the timetable because we're drawing down and our Kurdish allies are being marginalized, and they're the ones that gave us the intelligence to make this happen.
Charles?
I want to underscore what Ryan said. I think both of you, Scott and Ryan, said important things. What we needed Kurdish intelligence on this. That's the underlying point that Scott was making, and we got it this time. We hope we can continue to get it. Ryan's point is crucial because it's not only that we're protecting the oil fields, that's out there and everybody knows that. What our audience may not know is that those oil fields sort of stand in the middle of Syria across the route that Iran wants to take to get all the way to the Mediterranean and into Lebanon and so forth. So having mechanized troops there indicates that we're not there to fight small groups of terrorists. We're there to stop an Iranian army from moving big resources. Is that right, Ryan?
It's partially right. It's also taking
Partial credit? I get partial, the professor gets partial credit?
Well,
Surprisingly good.
it's also to deny the resources and the revenue from the oil fields going to fund ISIS, because that was part of the problem. If they have an open checking account that's an oil field, denying them that is going to hamper much more than al-Baghdadi's death.
The president today, he thanked Russia, Turkey, Syria, and then he came back later and also he separated the Kurds out. But he said they all helped. They all made this happen because they were somehow involved. He was less specific about what the Kurds actually did, but he certainly said that the helicopters they flew over all these other countries, and those countries did not fire on them. How significant is that? Well,
my first question is, why, and I don't want to make too much of this, but, why is Russia the first country that's thanked? Why does President Trump tend to make decisions that favor Russia? And I'm also concerned about this shift away from protecting the Kurdish population, and I'll expand on that.
Okay. We'll do that when we come back, 1-800-723-8200. Maybe we'll dig a little bit deeper into a little more about the Kurds, because obviously we're hearing a lot about them now. But again, our story and our relationship with them goes very, very deep. I'm Bruce DuMont, back shortly from Chicago.
A line is a powerful thing. It connects the global economy to your living room, cleaner air to stronger markets, factory floors to less crowded roads, today's progress to tomorrow's promise. Norfolk Southern. One line, infinite possibilities.
Oh, hello. These days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago, and as the president was speaking today, he made the point that as he was watching all this unfold, that it looked like a movie to him. And I think that the narrative that he was using in talking to the American people today almost sounded like he was pitching a movie, or he had seen a movie. So there was certainly a theatrical way in which the president was describing in great detail. He's been criticized maybe for providing too many details. But Ryan, I want to come back to you because I want to spend a moment just talking about the operational challenges that took place before Baghdadi blew himself up.
Well, getting that many troops and aircraft moved safely over different zones that are being occupied with a lot of weapon systems that can do harm to the aircraft and the occupants at nap of the earth at night, and nap of the earth being 400 foot or less.
Yeah.
So they're terrain hugging in their flight path. And
Now, how high were they? Do you have any idea? Do we know that?
I would guess anywhere from 50 to 150 feet.
Okay.
And they tend to follow within the folds of the terrain, and that's the tactical flight pattern. I'm not an aviator. I don't play one on TV. I've been in helicopters. They're a lot of fun. But that many aircraft traveling on either probably multiple routes and then converging over the target, and there was also a fixed wing asset that was above them in a direct support role. So that orchestration of clearing those airways to get in there on time, on target, all of the elements arriving within seconds of each other, putting the ground force in, security force in, the breach. It's a ballet of...
A lot could go wrong.
Yes.
How did they know about all these tunnels? They seem to have really detailed information.
I'm sorry, you don't have a clearance.
I don't have the clearance?
No, you don't have it. And that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Our military and other government agencies, plus our friends, allies, spend an awful lot of time looking at the bad guy and developing and watching for patterns. So do they know that there are tunnels when they see piles of dirt out in the compound? Well, there are ways of figuring that stuff out, whether it's thermal or others.
Yeah. As I mentioned, kind of jokingly, but it's very true. A lot could have gone wrong.
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons I was a little surprised that the congressional leadership was not notified, and not because that you want to bring everyone in, but if things do go wrong, you want to have the ranking and minority members in both House and Senate, ranking and minority members of House Intelligence and Senate Armed Services. You want them in the loop, so that if things do go wrong, your team
But
is
what about the
assembled.
security issue? The president said that he didn't say he didn't trust them. He said
did.
there's a lot of leaks. Well, he didn't. Well,
De
he said
facto.
really sad, but
Yeah.
but the point is he obviously doesn't, and doesn't he have a reason not to trust them, Mark?
Well, and I think this is one of the challenges of our current political discourse is we can hold two ideas simultaneously in suspension here. So I can agree that President Trump has been a vilified figure since he's been elected, but I can also agree that, yes, maybe he's abused his power. Maybe he should have brought in Congress into this
You would have
decision.
advised him to tell Adam Schiff that we had a secret raid going on. 8 helicopters were going in, and Adam Schiff, you would expect, would sit on that overnight.
Well, I will tell you, having worked in government, people take their security responsibilities seriously. They take their security clearances seriously, and if you're brought in of it's a very small group of people. This is what's going on. Yeah, you take that very seriously.
Yeah,
I don't think he would leak it, but I'll tell you this. He's leaked a lot of stuff, and over the next week or two, you're going to see really serious allegations of leaking about the highest ranking members of the Obama administration. And there's almost no question that they did leak classified material for political interest.
But before we go back,
That's a lot of innuendo. Let's wait till we see some facts.
And I'm going to
before
go with the
we-
real simple rule of classified information. There is a need to know, okay? And need is not a want to know. And given the relationship between the House Intel Committee, which has shown zero interest, in my humble opinion, about the whole situation in this area of the world, they've been focused on other things. They didn't have the need to know. They didn't have the interest to know.
But at least the congressional leadership in both House and Senate should have been brought in, because if things did go badly, then you don't want to make that call that things went really badly.
But each of the principals there, the president and Nancy Pelosi, they have each said the other person is crazy.
But also Mitch McConnell
Nancy-
and Chuck Schumer and
Yeah, okay.
But you were not. If you let them in, I think that that's right. I think that it would have been better to tell Nancy Pelosi and to tell Mitch McConnell. I think it would be hard to tell Schiff if you don't tell his counterpart if you tell his counterpart in the Senate and don't tell him. But where I disagree,
He told Burr. He said he spoke to Senator Burr.
in advance.
Yes.
Yes, I hadn't heard that.
No, he said that he spoke to Senator Burr.
Okay,
who was
so
the head of the Senate.
here's where I disagree with you, Scott. I don't think that you're telling these people in order to get buy-in, in order to get shared decision making. This is the president's decision and should be. And if it goes wrong, it's his baby to lose as well. Did you mean something?
Well, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I agree. It's his decision to make, but you bring them in so that if things do go wrong, you can have some kind of backup plan. So we're all in damage control mode, and we want you all
I
on
don't think
board.
they would do that. I think they want to get him out of office.
Well,
So Nancy Pelosi's third in line of succession, so it would make sense to tell her. But circling back, so to what Ryan said, he was describing our military capabilities, which no one can dispute, I think. But the broader question, I think, was underscored this week by Ambassador Taylor's testimony, is that has to be coupled with a strong foreign policy and a strong State Department. And so what is our long-term vision? Where's our diplomacy? We're speaking all week about the SDF and the Kurds. You hear these words thrown around on the news, but the Kurdish people are a diverse population, 2 million people spread across 4 different nations without a territory to call their own, land expropriated from them, and now we've taken a position that's guaranteeing that they're going to be displaced from their lands again, and we're allowing Turkey to come in and take territory from the Kurds, who had been our allies for a decade, and they fought so hard not because they liked the U.S., but because they were protecting their land. And I think to not couple this important military action with a long-term strategic foreign policy is just dangerous. That's
Brian?
what I
Every time I come on this show, I talk about the 4 implements of national power: diplomacy, information, military, and economic. And for the past 20 years, 30 years, all we've done is picked up the golf club called the military and used it for diplomacy and used it for economic, and we need to stop doing that. And that's one of those whole of government solutions that the executive and the legislative need to get off their butts and start doing.
Yeah,
Kevin,
amen.
we're
That's
gonna take a
exactly
call.
right.
Kevin from Austin, Texas, KLBJ, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious what you guys thought of the headline with the Washington Post on the austere religious leader who
Yes.
passed away.
Right.
And the blowback on Twitter is absolutely hilarious. Talking about how Hitler, a struggling artist and community organizer, has passed away and so forth.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear what you guys have
It
to
was
say about
pretty
that.
stunning. I know, Charles, you are especially.
I am so
outraged
glad
about
you
it.
called in with that. Bruce and I were talking, in fact, the whole panel was, I came in and I said, I want you to know that the Washington Post had to change their headline 3 times. Remember, this is after the New York Times had changed a truthful headline because it appeared a few weeks ago to be too favorable to Trump. I think what you see is newspapers that consider themselves part of the resistance. There's been a blurring of lines in almost all the mainstream media between the news hole, which used to be very separate from the editorial page. The news hole, in the old days, the real problem was protecting the news hole from the advertisers, making sure that the big money didn't get in. But now it's just all editorial all the time.
I want to find out from the left side of the table how you feel about Bendadi being described as an austere scholar.
Yeah. So
What do you think of that, Mark?
So, it would be historically inaccurate not to acknowledge that he considered himself a religious prophet, but that would not be the foremost line in his obituary. I'm personally,
How would you headline it?
so
Head of ISIS.
Yeah, the head of ISIS,
right there.
terrorist leader.
Yeah.
So when a major news operation makes that decision, what does it say about anything else that they write?
Well, I think you're drawing a little too much of a conclusion there, but I totally agree with Kevin. I saw the Twitter feed and Twitter criticism of it. I totally agreed, and to me it was just a poorly written headline. It doesn't mean that the rest of the narrative that was coming out in the Washington Post, New York Times, whatever, was wrong. It was a poor choice of headline.
Some of these articles, they don't get to President Trump till the third paragraph. There's a rags to riches story of this austere religious scholar. Where's the beheadings in the first paragraph?
Yeah. Well,
So it's not so much, and I'm saying that the answer of the panel is probably right, but the folks who write the headlines and decide on the order of the paragraphs are not the same folks who write the stories and do the coverage. And in news writing, you start off with the strongest, and it's a reverse pyramid going down to the least significant. Those folks who are doing the headlines and making the editorial chops and rearranging stories, they're the ones that are in doubt.
Okay. 1-800-723-8029 from coast to coast and border to border. We will continue, and we'll talk more about the Kurds. And also, I want to get your reaction. How do you feel about this successful raid that led to Bendadi blowing himself up last night, surrounded by his 3 children? And again, the president painted a very eerie picture. Your reaction to it?
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Sonic family. From the town of Beltway, meet George Jetson, his boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
The economy is not working for everybody, especially those in jobs where unscrupulous businesses keep wages lower by hiring millions of illegal workers. Those businesses could use the government's E-Verify system to prevent illegal hiring, but they refuse. What's best for the country? Let businesses continue to hire illegal workers or require E-Verify, raise wages, and recruit left-behind Americans? See what voters want at everifyworks.com. Paid for by Numbers USA, because numbers count.
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us. We should mention, by the way, I'm sure you have read that President Trump is coming to Chicago tomorrow. He has a big speech to the International Association of Police Chiefs. That will be in McCormick Place, and then he's going to be coming to his hotel, which is literally 1 block from where we do this program. We can look right out the window and we can see it. And again, we're expecting huge crowds, protest crowds. Virtually every organization that you can think of that has opposed the president from the get-go, they will be surrounding Trump Tower, trying to shut the meeting down or keep people from going to the big fundraiser tomorrow night. And the Chicago Teachers Union that are on strike They're going to be there in big force. In fact, the Chicago Teachers Union, they had a class in civil disobedience. The teachers in Chicago, the members of the union, they were taught civil disobedience in courses last week. So they're going to sit down in the streets. They're going to stop traffic. They're going to do everything they possibly can. That's what Chicago teachers do when they're on strike. They may do it when they're working too, but we don't know that. But also, the police chief, who you would think would be at the International Police Chiefs Association, he's going to be there, but he is going to boycott the President of the United States because he doesn't like the President of the United States. He says that Chicago values are not the President's values. Now, this is Eddie Johnson, who is under investigation right now because last week they found him sloped over the wheel of his car, and they had to call the paramedics to get over there and wake him up. And he has admitted to the mayor that he was out and had a couple of drinks the night before.
And they didn't give him a breathalyzer.
And they did not give him a breathalyzer. So, you know, if he was not the chief of police, they would say this guy maybe was, you know, sleeping off a stupor. But we don't know that. We can't say that officially. But again, this is a Chicago value that if you have clout, you don't have to play by the rules. And we have a police superintendent who didn't play by the rules. And again, as you know, as you've been following for the last umpteen years, Chicago has a major murder problem. Many of the murders that take place in this city on the south and west side of young innocent people, they have not been solved. We have one of the lowest, police, solving of murders in the United States. And so he is going to not attend. He's going to show the President of the United States how much he disrespects him and how much he does not feel for him. And again, I want to just get, we're going to introduce everybody in just a moment, but even before we do that, I want to get reaction from Charles Lipsum. What do you think?
Well, at least
what do you think of Eddie Johnson's decision to snub the President of the United States?
I think it's sad but predictable. I think when he had slumped over in his car, at least he didn't say it was two guys in MAGA hats who did it to him. We've had, it's predictable.
And by the way, we should mention that Eddie Johnson is the Chicago police chief who was out front in the Jussie Smollett investigation and was very critical of Jussie Smollett. So again, there were a lot of people around the country that may have heard that name, and you may have been applauding him then because he was taking a very hard line. But this is the
he's
same
on
Eddie
thin
Johnson.
ice with the new mayor.
And he has bad health.
And he's got an impossible job. One of the reasons that so many of these crimes are not solved is that you see people in the hospital, and what does every article say? They are not cooperating with police. Why are they not cooperating? Because it was likely a gang fight, or they were assaulted by a gang, and they fear that if they cooperate with police and go back into their neighborhood, they'll be killed.
What's your take on it?
Well, the president has had the unfortunate tendency to belittle Chicago and belittle other, cities, Baltimore being one of them. And if you're a city official, that gets under your skin. And so I can understand why he's doing what he's doing. That's not the path I would have chosen. But
So the last time President Trump tried to come to Chicago, protesters greeted him over at the University of Illinois campus here and sent him packing, and he didn't come.
And violence broke out.
And there were some scuffles there.
And violence broke out outside. I was there.
It was an
Saw it.
organized effort to keep him from speaking.
By the way, this is the first time he will visit Chicago since being elected president. But go ahead.
Correct. But, to return your opening comments, Bruce, I think there's a connection between the schools and the police in Chicago, which is there always seems to be money for more police, but now when the teachers are asking for more funding for the schools, they can't find it. We can find $200 million for road changes for the Obama Center, but we can't find the money for the schools. So let's stop investing in the police. Let's start investing in the children.
Ryan, what do you think of the decision by the police chief not to show up?
I'm very glad to be in Chicago tonight. I'm even more glad that I don't live in Chicago, and I get to drive into the city. The decision is bluntly cowardly. He should show up, and if he has the cojones, then he stands up and turns his back and he shuns the president and does it publicly. But his longevity in his position relies on the complicity and support from Mayor Lightfoot and other elected officials within the hierarchy of the state.
She's not going to see the president. She's going to the conference, but she is not going to see the president as well. So, if Chicago gets a short shrift on some federal funding, maybe this is one of the reasons,
Well,
Anyway,
I think
that's
that's
our
already
take
in
on
the
this.
works. But
On that happy note,
By the way, the murder clearance rate was the term I was looking for police. Let's take a moment and let our guests introduce themselves. And we begin tonight with someone who's making a return visit after a long time, Scott Hibbert.
Yeah, so I'm Scott Hibbert, and I teach in the Department of Political Science at DePaul University. I do courses on international relations, American foreign policy, and Middle East politics, among other topics. And I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for about 20 years. I did my doctorate out there.
Who did you work for?
So I worked for a Democratic senator from Arkansas named Dale Bumpers. I worked for two other House members, Louise Slaughter and Tom McMillan. And then I later worked for the U.S. Institute of Peace.
Okay, and let's go with Charles Lipson.
I like Dale Bumpers from my
great.
neighboring state. I was originally from Mississippi. I've taught for many years at the University of Chicago, where I do teach political science, mostly international politics, but some issues like core Western values. I'm now an emeritus professor, but I'm a columnist also for Real Clear Politics. I write for them fairly often, and I sometimes write for other sites, including the American site for the British magazine, The Spectator.
And by the way, so I want to just take a moment because if you are a regular viewer or listener to the show and you've gone to Beyond the Beltway, the Facebook page, if you want to go to the Beyond the Beltway fan page, it's a different page. You've got to go in there and ask to be friended, and we will friend you. But all the guests that we have on this program, many of them are very erudite. They do a lot of writing, and we've reached out to virtually all of them now, regardless of whether they're on the left or right. Many of them write, and when we've asked them that if they write for a periodical like Real Clear Politics, we've asked them if we can put their scholarly work on the Beyond the Beltway fan page. So we'll invite everyone else who's here this evening. And again, if you go to the Beyond the Beltway fan page, you have to ask for it. You've got to go to the Beyond the Beltway fan page. It just says Beyond the Beltway fans, and sign up for that. And you will be able to hear the comments and thoughts of those who you may like or dislike when you see them and watch them on the TV show. Mark Cosello.
I'm Mark Cosello. I'm the Director of English, Writing, and Professional Communications at Calumet College of St. Joseph in Whiting, Indiana. And I live on the south side of Chicago in the Pullman Historic District, and I'm the founder and president of an organization, the Pullman National Monument Preservation Society, which works, it's a historic preservation advocacy organization trying to protect the only national monument in the state of Illinois.
And Ryan Yantis.
Good evening, Bruce. I'm Ryan Yannis, Silverleaf Leadership Communication. I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel with 22 and a half years service in 33 countries. I do leadership training and coaching, and I think Bruce invites me on because I have more of a practicum of experience rather than a formal education of experience. So delighted to be here.
Right. We should also mention, by the way, I want to go back and just button up the subject of the raid that forced Benghazi to blow himself up. But were you worried that some of the rhetoric that the president used was maybe a little too graphic, or clearly it was intended, I think, to ridicule and really to disseminate the reputation of Benghazi?
Yeah, Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. So I mean, it was obviously intentional, and they were trying to denigrate this individual, and I get it. I mean, a lot of American strategy has been to demystify ISIS and to get the word out that this is a really heinous group, and countering their propaganda. My only concern is the way in which he uses the language. It may play well to a domestic audience. It's not necessarily going to play the same way to a foreign audience. And even like that letter he wrote to President Erdogan the other week, "Don't be a fool." I mean, that plays well in Chicago or New York real estate. It doesn't play well in international politics.
And should we expect some form of reaction from ISIS in a terrorist way, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The bad guy always gets a vote. And when we have our worst experiences is when we think that we're ahead in the game and we're not paying attention. September 10th, 2001, the national focus was on anything but Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And he had declared war on us a decade before and was vigorous in pursuing it. And that complacency is what led to such a shock. Plus, they had a very well planned, resourced, and executed operation.
Well, Robert Pape, your colleague at the University of Chicago, who has been a guest on this program a number of times, he has said that whenever ISIS or even Al-Qaeda, whenever they were losing on the battlefield, they had to do something dramatic in the area of terrorism, just to let people know they were still back in business. So I would assume that if the top of the operation is gone, we might.
But that implies
we got to be back shortly from Chicago.
When CSX moves forward, so do the rest of us.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Sanctions, what's on the table?
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. The other big story last week, obviously, was the continued testimony that's going on behind closed doors, led by Adam Schiff. And I want to get everybody's reaction. Is everybody, I know the Democrats may like the idea. Are you satisfied with the process that's being used to look into the allegations against the president?
I am, because we've just lived through the Robert Mueller, years of the Robert Mueller probe, and I don't want to go down that road again. I don't think the American people do. So this is operating in the form of, in a style like a grand jury. They're gathering facts. I think they'll come to a conclusion fairly quickly because the facts are speaking pretty loudly. And as long as the Democrats can keep this focused and clear to the American people, I think that 50% number who are in favor of this inquiry will
Do you think they're doing it, Scott? I mean,
Yeah,
do you think
the one thing I would add is this is just stage one. I mean, there'll be open hearings in stage two, and even the closed door sessions. Let's keep in mind there are Republicans there too. So, but you're getting depositions. It's important that not everybody that's not done in open session, because you want to make sure that everyone who's testifying and giving a deposition does not know what came before them. There will come a time for open hearings, and then there will come a time for actual, a trial if it gets to that.
Are you bothered by it, Charles?
a lot. This is democracy dies in darkness, and those people have been absolutely silent. Here's the problem: everybody knows that that there's not enough material to convince 2/3 of the Senate to impeach. This is all about the 2020 election. It's all designed to build a portfolio and to put mud on Trump. Now, maybe he deserves some of that mud. Maybe
I would
some
push
of
back
it,
on that.
No,
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot there.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who say it's like a grand jury, Schiff would go to jail for leaking grand jury materials then, right? Because he comes out and leaks it. The president's lawyers are not allowed to be present, and the Republicans are not allowed to call witnesses. And when they want to even go back in and read the transcripts, they have to have a Democratic staff member sitting there with them. I guess they have to get a bathroom
How do you react
pass.
to that?
Yeah, so I would just say there are over 40 Republicans participating in this, and I would like to believe that they're just so ethical that they wouldn't leak, and that they're just waiting until the moment where those transcripts come out and they say, aha, look at all these things disproving William Taylor, and look at the whistleblower was wrong. But those aren't leaking. That's not coming out. We're not hearing that. And I don't agree with how Adam Schiff opened up with his characterization of Trump as a mafia figure. All that was silly and stupid. But I do think there's something here that needs to be.
Why is it be done in the Intelligence Committee and not in the Judiciary?
Well, if I can interject.
Go ahead, and then Ryan.
If you look at the precedent of both the Clinton and the Nixon impeachment processes, much of this deposition, much of this initial investigation was done by the Department of Justice. In this instance, the Attorney General Barr has refused to open any kind of investigation. So in this instance, the House is having to do that.
So
Right.
it bothers me. Mr. Schiff is the House Intel Committee chair, and is that the right committee? They should have been paying attention to what's going on in Turkey, Syria, North Korea, South Korea, China at all, but seems to be fixated on something in the rearview mirror from Ukraine about 4 years ago.
So Jerry Nadler really should be in the lead on this?
I don't know who, but I don't think it's Mr. Schiff. I'm also very bothered that they're using a SCIF, which is a secure compartmentalized information facility, a classified vault, and going to what Charles was saying about democracy dying in the darkness. That's a bad precedent. If you're doing something and you believe in it, just like I said with the police chief, go out and do it in public and take a stand. This is bull.
The public stuff will come. And the one thing I will add is, particularly the testimony that was released by the former ambassador this week, Taylor. Basically, what he described was a two-track foreign policy. There's the official policy, and then there's a behind-the-scenes policy led by Rudy Giuliani. And when the official policy or official policy makers got in the way, they were removed. That is enormously troubling on any number of
I've
levels.
been assured by my friends on the left side of the aisle for about 3 years that this is the nail that will go into his coffin, and it's getting old.
It's fully within the president's purview to conduct foreign policy through back channels if he wishes. The question is whether or not there were illicit things that were made. There was corruption in Ukraine. We were giving aid to Ukraine. They may have been involved in the 2016 election. They didn't investigate it. But it is not appropriate, in my opinion, for the President of the United States to ask specifically to name somebody who is a current opponent of his and his son as people to be investigated. If the Justice Department wants to do that and the President asks Ukraine, please cooperate with our investigators, I think that's appropriate. So I'm not trying to excuse everything Trump has done, but there's nothing wrong with two-track diplomacy. And the idea that everybody in Washington wants to protect career bureaucrats and say that they are in charge of foreign policy, I think that's wrong. It's a unitary executive branch, and there's only one elected official in it, and that is the president.
But it also depends on what the intent of the operation is.
That I agree with, and that's what I was saying. But nobody elected anybody in the Foreign Service. Nobody elected any ambassador.
And William Taylor echoes your point in his testimony, Charles.
When we come back, I want to talk more about the relationship between Ukraine and also the impeachment. Charles, you wrote on that recently. And also, I want to talk about the other investigation that's going on. There's an Inspector General report that's due, and also there is the report or the investigation, now a criminal investigation by John Durham at the behest of William Barr. And we're going to talk about where that might go, and is that going to even up this in the court of public opinion? Is the investigation into the origins of all of this Russia stuff, is that going to be a big plus for President Trump? Or could that be also a surprise that comes back to bite him in the rear end? Back shortly from Chicago, I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Welcome to the world 2116. You can fly across town in minutes, or across the globe in under an hour. Whole communities are living on Mars, and solar satellites provide Earth with unlimited clean power. In less than a century, Boeing took the world from seaplanes to space planes, across the universe and beyond. And if you thought that was amazing, you just wait.
Today, fresh fruits and vegetables will go from a field in California to a grocer in Miami. A bottle of beer from Eagle Pass will journey to a restaurant in Manhattan. A 2x4 in Oregon will find its way to a townhome in Denver. A hybrid will say goodbye to Detroit and hello to a showroom in Austin. While a steel beam will leave a mill in Illinois for a high-rise in Phoenix. And a flat screen in China will head to an electronics store in Memphis. Because today, as every day, wherever you find business, you'll find us.